The federal government has approved a massive shakeup in the mining world. London-based Anglo American has received federal approval to acquire Teck Resources, making two major mining giants one in a $70 billion merger. Anglo Teck is set to have headquarters in Vancouver, and Premier David Eby says it'll be the largest company in BC history. Posting on social media, Eby wrote, "They'll help unlock prosperity in the Northwest and deliver good jobs and benefits across the province." For more on this, I'm joined by Industry Minister Melanie Joly. Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, David.
David Eby obviously is a fan of this, but I wonder, at a time when Canada is looking to protect and build its economic sovereignty, why is it the right move to allow Canada's largest mining company to be taken over by an international giant?
Because we're creating a Canadian giant. That's what we're doing. This was a net benefit for Canada. And why am I using the expression net benefit? Because it was my job under the Investment Canada Act to see whether it was a net benefit. So what do I mean by that? 4,000 jobs that are protected, nearly 3,000 new jobs being created, a headquarter in Vancouver for a global mining giant, and finally, the possibility of having a real impact in the development of our critical mining sector, the critical minerals sector in Canada, at a time where we're competing with China. And so that is why we decided to take this decision. More than that, actually 50% of the board will be Canadian for the next 7 years. After that, 33% of the board will remain Canadian. And at the end of the day, what we were able to do, David, for the first time in Canada's history, we're able to anchor the headquarter of Anglo Teck in Vancouver forever, in perpetuity, notwithstanding future transactions. So it's really good news for Vancouver, obviously. It's great news for BC, but it is also great news for Canada.
I read some reporting, though, Minister, that the company would still be largely headquartered in London and still listed primarily on the London Stock Exchange, and that Anglo will remain domiciled in London and its primary stock listing will be the London Stock Exchange. This is what the Globe and Mail is reporting. I mean, how is that align with what you've outlined there with the headquarters being in BC?
So I would challenge that. First and foremost, 66% of all the mine and management, so basically the decision makers, will be in Vancouver and will be paying Canadian taxes. There will be people leaving London and establishing themselves in Vancouver. And that's what was negotiated, is clearly in the undertakings. And also, we think that it is great news also because not only did it get, obviously, the support of the government, but it got the support from the BC government, it got the support from the unions, from the different communities across BC. So based on that, and based also on a very strong and tough negotiation, we were able to approve this deal. And this is actually good news at a time where Canada is trying to diminish its over-dependence towards the U.S. and find ways to attract more investments in Canada from different sources, including obviously from Canada, but also from Europe. And so that's also why it was strategic to be able to approve this decision.
You said there a second ago, Minister, that 50% of the board would be Canadian, if I heard you right, over a period of years, and then it would drop to about a third. Are there other conditions that sort of decay over time, where the threshold or the requirement diminishes? Because often they lock in and make commitments for a 5-year horizon or a 10-year horizon, but after that, does it run the risk of the workers leaving Vancouver and moving to another country?
See, you're asking a very important question, David, because that was my concern. And I went through this as a Montrealer with some companies in the past. And so I had that in mind when really negotiating. And for me, what was important was to anchor the headquarter in perpetuity, notwithstanding future transactions in Vancouver. And I was inspired actually by what was done in Australia. With an important company which is called BHP. And based on what they did at the time, I thought, well, you know what? We should do that for Canada, particularly at a time where we're in a trade war, and we need to make sure that not only are we protecting Canada's interests, Canadian jobs, but also our key assets, and trying to find ways to attract foreign direct investments, but from other parts of the world. And so that's why the Australia example was a good one, and that's why we're able to negotiate that. And that will make sure that we don't fall into reality that in 5 or 6 or 7 years there will be a wind down. The other thing also that was negotiated is there's $4.5 billion new money invested also in Canada in the critical mineral sector. And actually following these investments, which will be made mainly in the northwest of BC, there will be another $5.5 billion over the next 10 years. So I think that's also another reason why we wanted to support this important decision.
So you had to review this under new rules around foreign acquisitions of large mining companies.
Yeah.
I think brought in when Minister Champagne was there, if I remember correctly. And I think the primary motivation at the time was China trying to buy up assets in Canada. The changing nature of the United States obviously puts it in a more acute focus. But when it comes to a mining issue around critical minerals, would only be approved in the most exceptional of circumstances. What makes this the most exceptional of circumstances?
It is because basically we're making sure that Anglo-Teck is a Canadian company, period. So this is a merger of equals, where basically the people working for the company, the mine and management will be in Canada, paying taxes, headquartered in Vancouver. And that's why we can be proud of what was done by the founders of Teck at the time, where they developed a very important company. Eventually, they decided to take an important decision nearly 5 years ago by getting out of the coal business. And now they were focusing much more on copper and really interested in developing more critical minerals, which is a business that needs a lot of new capital in. At a time where indeed we're competing with China, which holds basically a lot of the control in the world on the critical minerals. So we are in this decision where we need to find a way to attract foreign direct investment to develop these different critical minerals, competing against China, being able to find a way to have countries that we have interest aligned and that are like-minded investing in Canada. And so comes in this important merger, like you were saying, $70 billion between a British company, a UK-based company, and a Canadian-based company. And now you're seeing that this is a merger of equal, but also that fundamentally the decision-making will be made out of Vancouver. And so that's why when Premier Eby says, well, this is great news because fundamentally this is going to be the biggest headquarter for Vancouver and BC, well, I must say, will be one of the big ones in Canada as well. So it just made sense, and that's why we took the decision. And I wanted to take the decision quite quickly because we want to show that we're not stuck in red tape. We know that there's a trade war going on. We know that we need to offer certainty, and that's why I decided to do that before going on the Christmas holidays.
Well, it is a big bit of work to get done before the holidays, but you mentioned copper a couple of times there, Minister, and I know you say this will be a Canadian mining giant, but it does operate in different countries, and there is some concern about just the dominance it would have in terms of its share and control of the global copper market. So there are other regulatory hurdles that this still needs to go through. So are you concerned of what kind of a delay that could lead to, in terms of how it operates globally and whether that could hold up the jobs and things moving to Vancouver?
Well, we understand that there are other jurisdictions that need to approve the deal. That's why also we wanted to send the strong signal quickly. And so there's been some approvals, not all, and we'll let the company do its job. But the biggest approval needed to come from their shareholders, and that was done nearly a week ago.
Industry Minister Mélanie Joly, we always appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you. Have a great holiday.
You too. Merry Christmas.